Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Now, let us discuss the role of context, as context plays a very crucial role in speaking. Fundamentally transient, and words are produced within the coordinates of a particular place and moment. Speaking is fundamentally transient, and words are produced within the coordinates of a particular place and moment. Nguyen defines context as the linguistic and experiential situation in which a piece of language occurs. The linguistic environment refers to the words, utterances, and sentences surrounding a piece of text. The experiential environment refers to the real world context in which the text occurs. Therefore, spoken texts are not created independently, regardless of the environment, the situation, or the listener. On the contrary, speech production takes place in a shared context between the speaker and the listener, whereby both these participants shape the final form of spoken text. The more shared context there is, the easier it is for the listener to participate in a conversation. We may even describe a listener as a co-author and speaker as a co-listener. As a result, spoken texts carry a number of specific features. Frequent use of references like pronunciation or dictic words, this, that, there, pointing to the physical context. Ellipsis like deliberate omission of certain items, the meaning of which can be reconstructed only from the context. Non-clausal stand-alone expressions such as yeah or whose interpretation is heavily context dependent. It is the context that primarily helps us reconstruct the meaning of these utterances. By contrast, in writing, these elements are used less or avoided completely, because written texts, being decontextualized, need to be as self-explanatory as possible. While ambiguities are not desirable in written texts, because there is no opportunity to provide further explanations, the meaning of utterances that are ambiguous can be easily negotiated in speech. Moreover, ambiguous utterances in speech are frequently welcome, as they usually come into a source of humor, an important ingredient of daily conversation. Furthermore, as mentioned earlier, spoken texts can contain numerous examples of imperfect language and instances of disfluency, such as hesitations, errors, or repairs, which can again only be understood in the context they are used. Moving further, classroom implications, they also include teaching materials. As it has been indicated, spoken texts are not normally placed out of context in real life. The same fact should be reflected in the classroom setting. Structures and vocabulary should be viewed in their immediate context. Longer stretches of spoken discourse can prove extremely useful in demonstrating how different elements combine and work together to create a successful conversational exchange. Consequently, teachers should consider if materials and textbooks they use reflect the features of spoken language, both in their recorded and transcribed forms. If not, they may want to consider searching for other samples of spoken language which can be transcribed for a later systematic training in class. Recordings are more accessible nowadays than they used to be, and it is not difficult to find desirable samples online. More high-tech teachers may even consider recording their own spoken texts. In fact, this is something which can be done quite easily. Take for example, while on holiday chatting with your friends or asking your native speaking colleagues to talk on a certain topic using specific language, etc. More than 30 years ago, Crystal and Davy, they complained of the tendency of textbooks not to be real. I quote that people in textbooks, it seems, are not allowed to tell long and unfunny jokes, to get irritable or to lose their temper, to gossip, especially about other people, to speak with their mouths full, to talk nonsense or swear even mildly. They do not get all mixed up while they are speaking, forget what they wanted to say, hesitate, make grammatical mistakes, argue erratically or illogically, use words vaguely, get interrupted, talk at the same time, switch styles, manipulate the rules of the language to suit themselves, or fail to understand. In a word, they are not real. All these features are still deliberately being omitted from language teaching, and simplified and unauthenticate materials are used. When we talk about communicative tasks, the fact that interactions can be predictable has important implications for teachers. They can help their students prepare for both types of conversational exchanges, transactional and interactional. Since these have different features and a structure, they require different skills to be trained. On one hand, service encounters are relatively easy to deal with for their easily predictable structures, and students will strongly benefit from practicing various kinds of transactional interactions, because these will help them prepare themselves for real life situations. There is also an emphasis on the fact that learning prefabricated conversational patterns enables learners to outperform their competence. This means that learners can become relatively confident in many situations, even with rather limited language means at their disposal. On the other hand, interactional exchanges in comparison with transactional ones will probably bring more life and enjoyment in the classroom, thanks to their free nature and eventual inclusion of sharing personal experiences. Moreover, the later point is believed to be a motivating factor, facilitating language advancement based on the evidence from pre-interaction studies. We may even list down sharing experiences as one of the tasks types to be used in the classroom. Furthermore, it may be stressed that the importance of personal speech in teaching should never be negotiated. When we talk about the use of support, the use of personalized talk by reporting, that it has even become an integral part of one of the methodological approaches, namely community language learning, developed by Curran. In 1976, Thornbury Slade complained of the methodologist preference of transactional language teaching and their choice or to neglect free open discussions in language textbooks. They remark that many classroom activities such as role plays tend to be too prescriptive. Consequently, classroom exchanges with their interactional or transactional have a tendency to turn into transactional turns, leaving not much room for free interaction. By the same token, if instructions and work plans are too detailed, learners numbly follow their patterns in pre-given sequences, focusing on task completion without the need to employ their pragmatic and discourse skills. This is because they are simply not required to think about a discourse as a whole and produce it independently. Classroom implications, while talking about their conversational classes, they are to become a truly effective participant of a conversation, means to be able to interact with others spontaneously under many different and unexpected conditions. and about a broad range of topics. In this respect, purely conversational classes can be a challenge both for teachers and learners. As a learner, it is challenging to become an effective interlocutor in a foreign language, especially if one does not possess these skills in one's language one. In the first place, by analogy, it is similarly challenging, if not impossible, to become a good teacher of conversational classes if one is not aware of all the skills that speaker need, or if one cannot utilize them effectively oneself. One's personality also plays an important role here because it fundamentally influences the nature of conversation. It is essential for learners to have teachers who they can learn conversational patterns from on a daily basis. By observing the ways that teachers interacts in the classroom, for teachers to be able to serve as good models as far as conversation is concerned is essential for several reasons. Firstly, it is generally believed that languages are learned partly through imitation. Secondly, evidences show that teachers are a source of input for learners, even more so in an EFL context, where the language lessons might be the only opportunity for some learners to listen to English being used. Thirdly, the teacher's role in the exposure of learners to language also should not be underestimated, because it is a proven fact that some aspects of language are acquired subconsciously. Lastly, being able to experience various conversational patterns in their natural context enables students to gain unique language experience that is likely to have a positive effect on their language acquiring. And depriving students of these opportunities, on the other hand, is a fundamental pedagogical failure. By the same token, this is what Lightbaugh and Spada complain about when saying that in many foreign classes, teachers switch to their students' first language for discipline or classroom management, thus depriving learners of opportunities to experience uses of the language in real communication. Learners often do not realize the complexity of these skills that is required, but attribute their eventual failure to inadequate knowledge of language. Diligent students often try to learn as many new words as they can in hope that their conversational skills will improve as their vocabularies grow. However, the result of such striving can only be disappointing, because, as can be inferred, no knowledge of lexis or grammar can substitute for inadequate interaction skills. Undoubtedly, it is a teacher and teacher's role to illustrate the complexity of skills that are required and help their students acquire them. Along with, it is also a good idea to help learners understand one of the fundamental features of conversation discussed in the previous section, which is that conversation is a two-way interaction. Learners therefore cannot attribute eventual failure of conversation to their linguistic incapabilities. All in all, teaching conversation amounts to teaching interaction and everything that it entails. Some of the skills that are necessary for one to be able to converse have been touched upon. One might infer from what has been mentioned so far, the ability to speak a language involves much more than mere linguistic knowledge. The range of knowledge and skills that are necessary are called communicative competence. On a final note, it needs to be pointed out that for teachers it is especially important to be aware of the above mentioned differences between speaking and writing. If teachers take them into consideration, they will more likely be able to create lessons that will truly help learners acquire skills that are needed for an effective oral communication.